The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. This episode is sponsored by the Op, also known as USAopoly.
The Dice Tower, episode 682, Fort Worth.
Welcome to The Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them.
In today's show, we talk a new undo, we gain enlightenment through cards, and we'll talk a couple of apps. We'll wrap up the show with a Victory Point segment looking back on all of the virtual convention experiences we've had. I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandi Hutchinson.
Woo-wee! We have had one heck of a busy gap between podcast episodes. But that's okay. We're making magic happen, right, Mandi?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And I don't know if you saw this, but pandemic schmandemic, right? Mm-hmm. 2 new board game publishers announced their formation in the last week. Darrington Press, which is part of the Critical Role TTRPG family. It's going to be a board game company, I believe, basing board games in that Critical Role world.
Nice.
It's being headed up by Ivan Van Norman, who is somebody who I've had the opportunity to meet and spend a little bit of time with, and who I like very much. So I'm excited to see what they do. And then War Chief Gaming. War Chief! Now, this is a analog game company being started by Chris Metzen and Mike Gilmartin. And if those names aren't familiar to you, they are both former executives of Blizzard. And, they were at Blizzard for a long time. So when we talk about World of Warcraft and all that good stuff, right? Here are 2 folks from that group starting an analog game company. Now, it sounds like a lot of their inspiration is from, like, Warhammer and 40K and things like that. So I'm expecting it will be more miniatures wargaming oriented. But I don't know. We'll see. I think it's fascinating how board gaming continues to grow and continues to draw attention and attract new fans and inspire creative people to dig in and invest in the industry and try to make new things. So we'll see what comes out of Darrington Press and War Chief Gaming. War Chief! I have to admit, that name is not... Whoa, War Chief!
Is that like their ad? Is that how they say it?
Sounds very hardcore!
Hardcore war. Woo!
Mandi, you and I know also, we make time for this, and I don't know what we're going to do when this is over. What are we going to do when our campaign of My City is done, Mandi?
I know, like it's... and I never thought, first of all, that we would even finish it. I thought, okay, we'll play a few games, we're really busy. But no, like, we've been plugging along. I don't know what's going to happen after this, but, good gravy, I'm not sure.
It's a good one. And so we are up to the last chapter, and each chapter is 3 games. And as we've reported in previous sessions, we just continue to really enjoy it. I think the twists that they add each chapter are interesting. I find myself frustrated, and I'll be curious to see how it all ends up, because what I have found, and again, I am trying to keep this very spoiler free.
Right.
There's a campaign score track, essentially. You're earning these dots on this track as you go. And in the beginning, if you won the game for the points, you would get dots on this track. But as the game goes on, you earn dots for other accomplishments as well. And now I'm in a position where I have, point-wise, won the majority of the games that we've played.
Right.
But I am now behind in the campaign dots.
Yes.
And don't smile. Oh my gosh, you should see Mandi's smile. Mandi has the biggest smile on her face. She is so evil. She's loving it.
I was so far behind, and now this change of events has allowed me to kind of push forward a little bit. So I'm liking it, but at the same time, it's at the detriment of my competitors.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how all that works out. And conceptually, I like the idea of not relying on game score to be the only thing moving you through this campaign.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to this last chapter, but also a little sad that it's going to end. But My City will report back in a spoiler-free comments at the end, maybe even by next episode. Who knows?
Yes, and we may pick up another campaign game. Maybe. We're thinking about it. Maybe. So
well, we have to fill the gap.
I know, that's exactly it. So I'm not going to say what it is yet. Keep you on the hook until we finalize details, but I think some of you will be very shocked, especially because I'm playing it. We'll leave it there.
Vague podcasting is
right.
And hey, Mandi's been streaming a ton on the Twitch channel Salt and Sass, video games, and just other goofy games. We've been streaming on Dice Tower as well. And we have one of those shows coming up this week from the time that this episode is airing. On Wednesday, we are going to have another episode of Apptastic. We're going to be playing Yellow and Yangtze.
I'm so excited for this one.
And Mandi and I have played this a few times together, and we put off streaming it for whatever reason, but I'm really excited to play it against you, Mandi, on a live stream. So if you feel like joining us live, jump on in on Apptastic at 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock on Wednesday, or you can always watch the replay to see who emerges victorious in their conquering of the territories with all the hexagons.
Spoiler alert, it's probably going to be Suzanne.
We'll see.
My last play was rough. It was rough. I think I gave you points. Oy, oy, oy.
It's a really great app, and I'm looking forward to showing it off.
Absolutely.
Speaking of showing things off, I gotta say, we got some pretty great games to talk about today, so let's get to it.
So, what have you been playing lately?
All right, well, games played. I'm going to give you the spiel that I've been giving every episode now. All the games I'm talking about, I've played on Tabletopia. So I do actually have the physical games for most of them, not all, but these are still games that I think would still work the same way in person. Do you know sometimes it can be altered when you play like an electronic or digital version of a game? These I think are literally going to be exactly the way that you would see them in person. So that lets you also know that they are all available on Tabletopia. So let's start off with Undo Forbidden Knowledge. So I don't know if you're all familiar with the Undo series, but I think I've reviewed all of them on the channel, if I'm not mistaken. This is one of the newer ones, and it's on Tabletopia. So this is designed by Michael Palm and Lucas Zach. Art is by Leah Froelich, and it's published by Pegasus Spiele. It's for 2 to 6 players, plays in about 45 to 90 minutes, and it retails for about $16 if you're going to buy the physical game. This is considered a cooperative storytelling type game. So for those who aren't familiar, people are like, oh, Undo, is it like Exit? It's not. It is different. So the Undo series, players are trying to do everything to undo the sudden death or event that has happened. You don't want that to happen. So what are you going to do to make sure, like what decisions are you going to make to make sure that that doesn't happen? And you have a timeline that you're working with all the way from like years ago, it could be possibly hundreds of years ago, to like seconds before the event takes place. So you have a timeline that you can kind of see that, and then little clue cards that you can also look at to give you more information. You want to try and get as much information as possible to help you change the events. So this is one of those games where obviously you don't want to give away too much. I have to read you what is on the site, because this I find is like, this is the story of the one that we're going to do. So sit with me while I read this, and hopefully I do a good job. Undo Forbidden Knowledge places you in a cemetery in the swamp. July 1923. A man in his 20s is standing next to an open crypt, a horrified expression on his face. Next to him are a backpack, a spade, and a portable telephone, the wire of which leads down the stairs into the darkness. "Get out! Push back the grave slab and run!" cries a panicked voice through the receiver. "I can't leave you, Harley," the man answers in a trembling voice. "Harley, can you hear me?" A crackling noise from the receiver makes him pause. Then a hollow, gelatinous, disembodied voice echoes through the receiver. "You fool, Harley is dead." The man begins laughing hysterically. To protect his sanity, his heart stops, and he drops dead. Dramatic pause here. So,
Dun, dun.
right? So, I mean, that kind of gives you an idea. So this is what you're getting, and now you have a timeline, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we make sure that doesn't happen? What decisions can we make so this doesn't occur? So I think that really sums it up. This one has and I don't know if this is a spoiler. You know what? I won't say it just in case it is. But let's just go with that. For now, I think some of you will like it if you like a certain type of writing by a certain author. We're going to leave it there, and you'll kind of gather what you will from that comment. So overall, I really enjoy this series. I know it's not for everybody. I think Tom doesn't particularly care for these series too much. I mean, I don't think he hates them, but I just don't think it's something he's mentioned that he prefers the Exit series. But this one in particular was a little different than the others. There was a bit of a twist, and there were a few different things that were not in the original game, so I liked that, so they're changing it up a little bit. So for those of us who play it often, we're seeing some differences, but in a good way. I like the fact that it generates really good conversation. So I played with my friend Ashley, and both of us are really into certain types of shows. So we tend to go on tangents and like pull in these like things that we think possibly could be the plot. And I don't know if that's just us making our own story and making it fit or working with whatever we have. But I mean, hey, we did really well in this one, so we're doing something right. So I really like the conversation. It's great to play online. I know that's not always a thing like people want to hear about, but in these times right now, this one was really fun to play online. We even got people that were watching the video, because I did a live video of this one, to join us. And it was great. And I feel like even though it was a longer stream, I think it was about 2.5 hours it took us to play online, it was fun. And even the people in the chat were like, they said, this was really, really fun. So long story short, I think it's really good, but I understand that not everybody is going to like this type of play. They may like to kind of problem solving of like an exit game or escape room type game, and not necessarily kind of working backwards, so to speak. So Undo Forbidden Knowledge for me was a winner. Loved it. I recommend you try it out.
I am very excited. I like this series, and I am looking forward to giving this one a try.
Yay!
I will have to, though, when I get it to the table, I'm going to have to call you into this session, Mandi, so that you can read it and set us up, and then we can play.
See, Eric Summer, I can do it too. Okay,
oh!
Okay, let's be clear.
Calling down the thunder.
Eric is amazing. I'm totally just joking. Not even close.
Eric, I am not her. That's Mandi. Sometimes people get us confused, like they, because they haven't seen us. They're listening to a podcast. That was Mandi. Dissing Eric. Mandi, not Suzanne.
I was kidding, Eric. Just kidding. You're the best.
Up for me is a, hold your breath, everybody, roll and write game.
Oh, there it is.
I know. You're
Whoop,
shocked.
there it is.
You're shocked. There it is, indeed. This is Der Clou, Roll and Heist.
Oh.
Designed and graphic designed by Benjamin Schultz. And this is a free to download print and play roll and write game. You can grab it on Board Game Geek or on their site, which of course I didn't write down in the show notes, but sorry about that. And there are 4 characters and 4 scenarios in the free downloadable PNP, and then you can get more scenarios or more heists for a small fee separately. I am just talking about the freely available set. For Der Clou Roll and Heist, you can play this solo or cooperatively up to 3 players. And that alone makes it stand out. There are very, very few cooperative roll and write games. And so I really like that about this game. Basically, you are going to get a thief sheet, and then there is a heist sheet. And everybody gets a separate thief sheet, and there are 4 different ones for you to pick from. And they do have slightly different abilities and skill sets, which can matter. On your thief sheet, you are going to be completing little spots to get tools, theft tools, aka icons, that you can then apply to the heist sheet. Meanwhile, on the heist sheet, there are different kind of quote-unquote rooms, which are just boxed-in zones on the sheet. And there are different icon requirements for you to crack the room and get to the loot. So maybe you need, and all of these have thematic names, which of course I don't remember, but maybe you need 3 light bulbs, or maybe you need 2 hand icons, what have you. And then there are different values of loot in different rooms. Sometimes to move from room to room, you need to have icons to unlock them. Sometimes there are special rules, like maybe the watchdog is there and you only have 3 turns to beat the watchdog. Not physically, but, overcome the watchdog so that you can access the room and things like that. You can run away if you think you have all the loot and see what you score. You can get caught. Because basically what's going to happen is you roll 3 d6s, just standard 6-sided dice. And you can combine these numbers as you need. But whenever you cannot use one of the dice, you tick off on the alarm track. So there is an alarm track that you're working against. And if you trigger the alarm, then you're in trouble. You can try to run away. And you're basically in a roll-off to try to beat certain values to escape with the loot that you have. Or you flat out lose the game. That's kind of the overview. Now, really the heart of the game is in the thief sheet. The thief sheet plays like Ganshon Clever in many ways.
Oh, neat.
There are different sections in it, and as you're rolling these dice, you can assign the numbers or the values to the different sections of this sheet. Some of them have tracks where as you're progressing and you're writing numbers in, they always have to get bigger, or they always have to be lower, or they have to be equal to each other, or some combination. There are different formations. There's an area where you're crossing out numbers. And if you fill in a whole row of crosses, then you unlock an ability there. Or there's a pyramid or a forced selection track where once you pick a path that you're on, that's the only path you can go on for the rest of the game. And the other paths that you haven't chosen are closed off to you. And really, it's all about the choices that you make and where you focus. Now, what I will say is with Der Clou, it's almost a little more strategic on where you are choosing to place your numbers, because which icons you are gaining access to very much matter on what you can apply to the heist sheet. So that feels a little more intense, and you need to be a little more purposeful than what I would say I experienced in a Ganshon Clever. That kind of tie-in between the thief and the heist is really interesting. And then if you're playing with other people, right, you're collaborating with them. You're like, okay, you're really good at light bulbs and I'm really good at hands, so we want to focus on that. But if the dice don't work for you, dun, dun, dun. Mm-hmm. And remember, if you cannot use a die, you're ticking off against that alarm track. And that applies to every player involved. So on one hand, it feels like an advantage to have multiple players playing. On the other hand, it actually adds a little more difficulty to it because you're under a different kind of pressure. And I think that's balanced quite well. There's also a couple other bits that scale depending on your player count. I will say, if you like roll and write games and you liked Ganshon Clever, there's no reason for you not to try this game. It is free to download and print or play on your tablet with an electronic pen or what have you. Give it a try. It is really, really solid. The heists are all different. The thieves have little different abilities to them. It's really engaging and a really interesting, surprisingly thinky little bit of roll and write play. And I am thoroughly enjoying it. That is Der Clou Roll and Heist.
So do you think it's going to be difficult to get high score? Because I know for myself, gosh, I'm clever. Ooh, I am not so clever. And I can never seem to get past like 200. And I see some scores of 300 and, upwards of 400. Is it that kind of, I don't want to say difficulty. Obviously, there's a strategy of getting those numbers, but is it something similar to that?
Yes and no. You are searching for a score, but it's really based on how much loot you get. What you do on your thief sheet doesn't score. It's really what happens on the heist sheet and how you're using the thief to access the heist sheet. And then your score ultimately is a combination of the loot you get and how quickly you did it. So that's where you can just pull, you can just say, I'm done. Right. I'm not going to get any higher score. Even if I unlock loot, it's going to take me so many more turns to do it. It's not worth it. So it feels different on that scoring front, to be honest.
Okay, that's interesting. Because, don't get me wrong. I love Ganshon Clever and all those games. I'm like, I might have a shot of having a better score on this one. So definitely
I think you might, actually.
All right. Well, I feel like it's been a while since I've talked about one of my favorite designers. Stefan Feld. I know.
Oh.
And maybe because we didn't go to Essen this year, I didn't, have
Right.
a chance to, find him, have a picture with him, chat with him, or whatever the situation may be. So, lucky enough, though, Castles of Tuscany has made its way onto Tabletopia, and I had the pleasure of playing that with Suzanne and my friend Ashley. And so this is designed by, of course, Stefan Feld, and art is by Ante Stefan and Klaus Stefan, published by Alia Games. And this is for 2 to 4 players, plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. I checked online and it says that it retails for about $50, or you can play it on Tabletopia. This game takes obviously place in Tuscany in the 15th century, and specifically looking at the Italian Renaissance. Players are princes, okay? And you're trying to make creative decisions to build your region into kind of like a flourishing type domain. So that's a lot of words. Basically to say, we each have our own boards it looks very similar to Castles of Burgundy. And for those who don't know, I believe they're hexagons. Correct me if I'm wrong, Suzanne.
Yes, hexagons, of course.
Just checking.
We're board gamers, darn it, hexagons.
I gotta say hex. I wanted to get the right number, like it's not a heptagon or something like that. So hexagon. Because I know I'll get called out on it.
Oh, yeah, you will.
Exactly. And they're hexagons on your board, and they have different areas like, farm area, or you have blue that's water, or you have, I don't know, I'm just making things up here, castles or dark green. So you have these kind of different color-coded areas on your board, and you're trying to get tiles to put on them to cover those spaces to get you points, or potentially get the bonus that it gives you. This is very similar to Castles of Burgundy, but in Tuscany, it works a little differently in the fact that you have a display of some tiles to choose from. And on your turn, you have actions to grab cards. The reason why you need these cards is because you have to spend them in order to put these tiles out on your board. So they have to match the color of the tile, or if you don't have the color, you just have to have more cards to get it out. So it just becomes more expensive. And you have other things to do on the board, like grabbing a tile. But in grabbing a tile from the display, wait, you have stacks of tiles. There are 3 stacks of tiles. You end up having to start from the leftmost. You take a tile from the display. That goes into your board because it doesn't go right on your area of hexagons yet, and you have to put one of your tiles back out, but you don't know what tile you're putting out because they're flipped, right? So you put it out and it could be a blue tile, and you're like, oh shoot, I really needed that blue tile, but guess what? Someone after you may decide to take that blue tile, and then they'll put a tile out, and hey, maybe it's going to be another blue tile, maybe it'll be something else. So the game plays over 3 rounds, and each round there's a scoring kind of in between. So once someone finishes their first stack of tiles, great, we do kind of that intermittent scoring. Play another round. When someone finishes their second, gets down to the end of the second stack, we do another scoring, third, end of the game. The scoring is kind of different in this one. And Suzanne, you might have to help me on this because I wasn't managing the scoreboard. So there are the 2 tracks. There's a green track and a red track. So take this away, Suzanne, because I'm going to screw this up.
Well, it's just a matter of during each round, you're going to actually track most of your points on the outer green track. So maybe in the first round, you get up to 10 points on the green track. At the end of the round, you quote unquote transfer those points to the red track. And the person who wins the game is the person who has the most points on the inner red track. Great. So 10 green points equals 10 red points. Ta-da! Next round, your green track does not reset. So then you get 10 more points in round 2. Now you have 20 points on the green track. Well, guess what? Now those points transfer to the red track. So now you actually have 30 points on the red track. So it kind of escalates that way. It doesn't reset. And that does mean that getting those early points really, really matters.
Absolutely.
Now, another game that has a different implementation, but it's reminiscent of, to me, is a game we just recently talked about with Ohanami, right? Ohanami has these 3 phases of scoring.
Right.
But you start with the blue one, and the blue one then scores every round thereafter. So those early points can really matter.
Absolutely. So I thought that was interesting the way that happened, and really pushed me to kind of, really get up on that track. And there are some bonus cards that give you red points. So that kind of pushes you up on the track as well. So that is something to consider. Overall, I liked this game. The first time we played it, I'm going to be honest, I was a little unsure about it. I think we all kind of were like, I don't know. But I also think that there were some potential issues in our game because certain tiles literally did not come out at all. And that shouldn't happen. That's what I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like you should at least see the colors that are on the board, and we did have some that just didn't come out. So that kind of threw us, I think, for a little bit. So then I've played it again, and I'm like, oh, there are those tiles. Now they're coming out. Ooh, I like where this is going. And I'm not a strategic player at all. This game appeals to me because it's really hard to plan. You can plan that you're going to take that orange tile from the center, but guess what? It's not your turn. Someone else may take it, another color may go out, and you have to now change kind of where you were going with it. I like to play games where I have to react, and I found that this game allowed me to do so. The last game I played, it was very close. I think it was like a 2-point difference. No, I didn't win, but it was close. I was playing Ashley, okay? It's hard to win against Ashley, okay?
Shark.
So a 2-point loss is actually a win in my book. So,
for reals. Ashley's like our Jason.
Yes, that is accurate.
Oh gosh, yes. I just said that out loud. Oops.
So, but to give you the picture that she's really good at games, and she's more of a strategic player. So it goes to show that, yes, you can do it. Obviously, she had to kind of change the way she was doing things, but she played very differently than I did, and still our scores were very close. So I did like that aspect that you could play so differently and still kind of have a very close match. That really appealed to me as well. So I think for me, this game, I'm trying to think if it's a game that I would need in my collection. I think for myself, because I like to collect Stefan Feld games, I would like to have it as part of like completing kind of like my little set. It's not a game that oh my goodness, I love it, I have to have it, I like it, it's good. Does that kind of, I don't know if that kind of tells you how I feel about it. So it's one that I absolutely would play again. It's one that I would buy it, but I think I'm buying it based on the fact that I like Stefan Feld games. I think someone who maybe likes a lighter kind of Feld game, I think this could definitely appeal to you, and I think that you'd be like, yeah, this is something that I could, you like games that play in that 45 to 60 minute range, then I think you will like this, and might be something you want to consider. I don't know, Suzanne, did you have any other thoughts you wanted to throw in on this one?
No, I appreciate the game for what it is. I think Castles of Tuscany lands in A. I will happily play it with friends anytime they feel like it, but I do not feel compelled to go out and purchase it at this time.
Right.
I really do enjoy Castles of Burgundy. This one is lighter, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Plays a little quicker, which I appreciate. But it didn't spark for me. But I should probably give it another chance before I make any final calls.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's Castles of Tuscany.
In a fairly significant switch of gears here, I'm still playing all the games that I've worked to get from Tokyo Game Market over the past year. Fish Farewell Forever.
All right.
There you go. This is a solitaire game designed by Pawn. The art is by Raiko Oba, and it's published by Buken. Okay. And I know that for some of you all, these won't be familiar names, but Pawn is the designer of other solitaire games that I'm very fond of called Sheffy and another one called Gorter. And I'm desperately trying to search down the other ones that they've designed that I don't own yet and haven't gotten a chance to play, but they're really hard to find. And it's breaks my heart. But Fish Farewell Forever is one of their newest ones. And this is a solitaire game about freeing you from the suffering of earthly desires.
Ooh. Okay.
Just that super lighthearted theme for you. I mean, Sheffy was about saving sheep from death, so I don't know. Whatever.
That's a twist.
So you have a bunch of cards, not even a bunch. It's like a 35 card deck. It's a small deck. And the cards are things like virtue, hunger, lust, absolution, acceptance. Like, okay. But really, they're all just very abstract. And the illustrations are very water painty, abstract looking things. And ultimately, it really is a fairly abstract game. On a turn, you're just going to draw 5 cards and then take actions. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is, quote unquote, liberate all of the cards by the game end. And you liberate cards because they have a cost to them, essentially, that you spend virtue points to do. And you can spend 5 virtue points. Okay, that card that costs 5 is now going into the beyond. I've released it. I'm free of it, right? Great. Some cards also have actions, so you can leverage those actions instead. They will let you draw more cards. They will let you liberate cards, things like that. Cool. You're going to play through the deck, and then whenever you have to shuffle the discard pile, you have to take 2 of the cards that you had liberated or moved into the beyond and move them into a different section called the far shore. Basically just moving them from your beyond to another pile. That's critical because that becomes your game timer. Because if you ever have to move cards from the beyond into the far shore and you can't, you've lost the game. Really, what this is a solitaire game about balancing the decisions with what you have in front of you. Because you have to liberate all of these cards. But when do you do that? Do you keep these high virtue point cards to help with your liberation process? Well, what's the timing on getting rid of those? Because some of them actually have quite a high cost themselves. So if you don't time that well, how long do I keep that card in my deck that lets me draw more cards? That's really, really helpful. But I got to get it out of my deck. When do I get it out of my deck? And you're going to deal with the randomness of the draw, and then you have all these cards in front of you, and as you use them, they move out of the zone where you can play them. It's a puzzle, and it's a balancing puzzle and a timing puzzle, which quite frankly is very much Pawn's design style. Sheffy very much feels like that. Gortaire slightly less so, but very, very much about timing. And I very much am enjoying it. I will say it starts to feel a little bit samey after a number of plays, but that's okay. I mean, I think it's one of those games that you can play and play and play, and then you've gotten by the time you kind of feel like you've played it, you've gotten the value out of the game that you wanted to. It's different, and I always appreciate and put some value on being different in the game market. Absolutely. So that is Fish Farewell Forever. It is a little challenging to get. It is available, but if you can order it from Japan, you can get it if you want to invest in that. What I will say is if you want to check out one of Pawn's games, their game Sheffy, which is a solitaire game that I very much enjoy, is available in app form. And so it's one that you can check out in that manner if you want to see if their games are something that you might enjoy. But Fish Farewell Forever, I like it. It's not going to be for everybody, but I'm enjoying releasing myself of my earthly desires.
Which, it sounds like it's a good time. I'm not mad at it. So, Sheffy, how do you spell that? Just in case anyone's looking for it.
Shephy.
Okay. I totally would have put an F there. So,
yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that sounds great. So, I mean, at least people could get it. It just might cost a bit to get it to. But hey, that's what it's about. Okay, this is my last game. I did want to say, and I forgot to talk about it in banter, and I really thought about talking about it here, but I'm like, oh, no, I can't talk about it yet. So, I'm just so excited. I got my trove chest for Too Many Bones. It's sitting behind me. I'm talking to Suzanne, and she can see this.
It's bigger than your head, Mandi.
Massive.
It's enormous.
But it's going to fit all of my Too Many Bones things in it, and Undertow, and Splice and Dice. Anyway, I went on a tangent. I was just so excited. I had to share it with all of you. I will be talking about this on our next podcast once I spend the 2 hours putting it together. But let's not talk about Too Many Bones now. Save that for the next episode. My last game I want to talk about is Noir Deductive. Noir Deductive Mystery Game Black Box Edition. So this is designed by D. Brad Talton Jr. and art is by Fabio Fontes. It's published by Level 99 Games. The game ranges in time and player count, so I'm just giving you kind of the idea because there are several games within this one. It's 2 to 9 players, and 5 to 20 minutes is the general gist of how long each game plays. And I think this retails for about $25 if you can find it, which I think it's sold out in a few places, but still there. Now, again, this one was played on Tabletopia, but I do own the physical game. I didn't realize how old this game was. I don't know. I've had it for a little while, not that long, but it's like 8-ish years. So, wow.
Oh my gosh, it's ancient.
Okay. I just feel like we talk about so many
seriously. In
games,
today's
right?
world, that I absolutely can
that's
feel
a long
quite
time. Time
established.
flies. So there you go. So if you are looking for it, it's not a new one. It has been out for a little while. So this game, it's a deduction game. I mean, if the title didn't tell you that, I mean, I don't know how else we could describe it. And it includes, though this game comes with 50 suspect and 50 innocent cards, And there are 6 game modes in this. So the ones that that you might see most often are Killer versus Inspector, Hitman versus Sleuth, Spy Tag, Master Thief versus Chief of Police. So the ones that I've played, because we played the 2 ones that are 2-player, I think it was the Master Thief versus Chief of Police and Killer versus Inspector. So those are the 2 that I played. And the Killer versus... can't talk today. Killer versus Inspector is a 2-player game of hidden identities and deduction. So each of the players, you get a secret identity from the 25 suspects and an open roll that determines the available moves and victory conditions. All right? So the Killer eliminates players focusing on reading your opponent. This is where this game is really important, and this is why you kind of have to, like, not look at the board closely while you're thinking of your moves. So it's like a tableau of cards. And on your turn, you can actually move the cards, like move a row up, and then, so, you know, the card that's on the top comes to the bottom and everything shifts. Because in order for the Killer to, now it sounds depressing, but to attack or kill somebody, you have to be adjacent to them. But when you murder someone and they're adjacent to you, you are now giving clues to the inspector saying, if this person was murdered, that means it could be any one of these people. So, you know, this is why the game is only between 5 and 20 minutes, because, I mean, it's fairly easy to narrow it down. You just want to make sure that the inspector's getting it wrong. Do you know what I mean? Because then they're required to give you clues. So, long story short, it's like a cat and mouse thing, but it's short, right? It ends in a short amount of time. You can shift the board, which kind of throws them off the trail for a little while, but it does get difficult when you get caught in a corner. That's the worst. Don't murder someone when you're in a corner, because now you've literally narrowed down the suspects, and the person could easily just be like, great, that's who it is, done. Don't do that. Can you tell? I've done that. Don't do that. So, this is the general gist of the game. You know, someone plays quote unquote the good guy, someone quote unquote plays the bad guy, and you're maneuvering the board trying to either murder someone or you're trying to determine who the murderer is and capture them. Normally, I don't like these kinds of games at all. I'm bad at them. I think it's at Letters to Whitechapel. Oh, good gravy. My friend's like, Mandi, he wanted me to be, what is it? Jack the Ripper. I don't know. He always plays a certain role. He wanted me to be the one where, you know, he's like, I do the other role so I can try it. Yeah, no. I think I was like found out in like 20 minutes. I'm terrible. So I like the fact that this game's only 20 minutes because then it doesn't make me feel so bad that I'm not very good at these types of games. But I liked this one. So the time for me was good. It was a good amount of time where everybody could get in on the action. Whether you won or lost, it didn't matter, but you had some time to kind of maneuver the board and kind of escape and do some fun things. It's portable, the size of this box. I mean, I guess that doesn't really matter currently, but later on it might. It's a nice size box that you can take with you. I actually keep this one in my office for lunchtime games because I thought that would be kind of fun to play with coworkers. There's some luck in the game. I mean, depending on the cards you draw, because in the game you can switch identities and things like that, and depending on where you are situated, sure. But it's not a significant. I don't think it's enough to be like, I'm never playing this game because there's so much luck. To a certain degree, you still have to be a little crafty in the game. So I know people are going to say that, but I think it's insignificant in this type of game. Overall, I actually enjoyed this. It's definitely taken me out of my realm of disliking these types of games, but I really liked it. Whether I win or lost, it didn't matter. I kind of liked the journey to get there, and I liked the fact that there are multiple games within the box, and then depending on what you're feeling like, you can play with either large player counts or have those 2-player moments. So, Noir Detect.
Wow.
Noir Detect. Oh my gosh, why am I having so... Okay, hold on.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Oh, good gravy. Noir Deductive Mystery Game Black Box Edition. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's because I like the versatility and the amount of games that are in the box that are all excellent.
I'm just going to move along to give you some relief there.
I don't know what's wrong with me.
It's, you know, you're doing just fine.
Take a breath, girl. Woo.
To wrap up games played, I'm going to close out with Red Cathedral.
I want to hear about this. I haven't played it yet. Very exciting.
Okay. Designed by Israel Sendrero and Sheila Santos, The art is by Kima Roman and Pedro Soto, and it's published by Devere Games. This is a game about building a Russian cathedral. And, dun 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 dun, it uses a rondelle, an action rondelle, which I think rondelles are awesome.
Agreed.
And you have a lot of action options in it where you've got these little banners that are your player color. The cards, basically cards represent the cathedral points, like doors or tower parts or the caps. So you can claim those cards, or you're going to gather resources using that rondelle to build those cards. You can build the cards, or you can add little personal decorations to score more points. The game ends when a single player builds their 6th section of the cathedral, and then the most points win. It's shocking, I know, how that works. The rondelle itself is dice-based. So the rondelle is really where you're going to be getting resources. That's the primary purpose of it. And first of all, the rondelle is randomized at the beginning of the game. So where you're going to get coins or gems or stone or whatnot is different in every game. And then there are 5 colored dice. And they get set out, and then on your turn, if you choose to get resources, you're going to choose a die. You move that die around the rondelle the number of spaces that are on the die face. So if the die shows a 3, you're going to move the die 3 spaces. Wherever the die stops in that wedge, those are the resources that you're going to get multiplied by the number of dice that are in that wedge. So if I move that die and there's another die in the wood wedge already, I'm going to get 2 times the wood resource because there are 2 dice there. Then you roll all those dice and put them back down. It's the next player's turn. There are tokens that you can get that will allow you to get extra bonuses when you use dice of a certain color. And this game features a dual scoring track. So there is we've seen it like Rajas of the Ganges, or even like what you just talked about with Castles of Tuscany. This one's maybe a little more simple, where you're going to be gaining building points, and then you cross the line for certain prestige points. And ultimately, it's the prestige points that will win you the game.
Okay, got it.
And there are instances where you're going to slide back in your building points to certain prestige point spots and things like that. But it does have this dual scoring track system as well, just to add a little more to this game. I love almost everything about Red Cathedral.
Wow.
I really, really do. The one thing that I'm not quite sure of, and I look forward to exploring it more, is how the dice work in the rondelle. The fact that they get re-rolled after that wedge is used can be pretty painful if you were counting on one of those dice on your turn, right? So, okay, I'm going to move that die that's in the wood wedge, and I'm going to get stone next, and that's going to get me 2 stone that I need to build this cathedral piece. And then, Mandi, you come in and you land in the wood wedge and you roll the dice, and then you've changed the value, and oh my gosh. Now, there are special ability cards in the corners of the board that apply to wedge. There is dice mitigation, which helps a lot.
Right.
And I think that the way the actions combine give you enough flexibility that if your resource plan changes in the moment because of that, there are other things you can do instead. But that's the one point of stress that I found during the game that I was kind of like, okay. That said, the game scales for player count, so you get different cathedral layouts depending on how many people are playing the game. And I love games that scale for player count because I think that's an important element a lot of the times. And what's interesting there is that when it scales, the number of dice don't change. So the rondelle can actually change more frequently in a higher player count game. Another thing that I'm really looking forward to exploring more, art in the game is quite pretty. It's got this round board and the 4 wedges have different scenes in it. It's got kind of this stylistic, illustrative line drawing look that I think is very, very pretty. When you complete a cathedral section, the card flips over, and so it actually looks like a cathedral is being built, which is kind of a nice thematic touch, and that looks cool. So overall, I think there is a lot of game in the box with Red Cathedral. A lot of game there. A lot to explore. I like the choices. I like that rondel. Dealing with the randomness is something I'm going to explore more. But overall, the other thing I want to call out here is this design team. So Israel and Sheila work together. They actually have their own, not publishing, I guess design identity as Llama Dice.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh.
Right?
Really? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I didn't even clue into that.
Yes. And so another game that they've designed is Smoothies, which is a roll and write game I look forward to covering sometime in the future here. And also 1987 Channel Tunnel, which is one of my favorite two-player games ever, right? It's got a very, very clever worker placement mechanism in it. I think this is a design team to keep your eye on. I think that they have proven their design chops. I think that they do interesting things with game mechanics, but I also think that they make fun games.
Yes, exactly.
And that is a pretty magical combo. So beyond what I'm enjoying about Red Cathedral, I think that Red Cathedral is the game that just for me personally really cements the fact that Llama Dice, Israel, and Sheila are game designers that deserve our attention in the future. And I'm going to keep an eye on everything they do based on the 3 games I just mentioned. So Red Cathedral, action rondel game, definitely worth checking out. I really enjoy it.
I was already looking forward to trying it, but now it's funny. I didn't even clue into me that was the designing team. And yeah, like just from the games you've discussed, the games I've tried from them, amazing. So now I'm really excited to try it out. I think it came with some little extra cards. I don't know if that's an expansion or not, but yeah, I'm looking forward to giving this one a go.
Alrighty, enough of that cardboard. Pshaw. Let's talk digital.
Brought to you by the Op Games, also known as USAopoly. If you're looking for something that is fun for the whole family and can also be played virtually, then the Blank Slate board game is your best bet. Blank Slate is the clever party game where you try to predict what others are thinking. For ages 8 and up, 3 or more players, and is available for pickup at your favorite toy or game shop or online.
And now let's look at the digital side of board gaming with Tap That App.
Okay, so the app that I'm going to talk about today is Ticket to Ride with the Europe expansion. I know what you're all thinking. Just take a moment, take it all in. Yes, I played it. And spoiler alert, I enjoyed it. Okay, so here we go. So, Ticket to Ride, the Europe expansion. This was done through Asmodee Digital. It's available on iOS, Steam, and Android at a price point of about $6.99. It's slightly less, I think, on Steam right now because guess what, everyone? It's on sale. Also with the other expansions. So that's something you might want to consider. The original game was designed by Alan Moon and I believe published through Days of Wonder Asmodee. So if you want to check that out, you can as well. Just for those who have not played Ticket to Ride, very simple. It's, one of those kind of games where you're trying to create rails based on cards that you have. So you have destination cards, so you want to get from point A to point B. You look at the map, tells you the kind of colored tickets you're going to need, because each kind of section may have different colored tickets for you to get from this point to the next. Obviously, trying not to be cut off by your competitors. And when you complete these tickets, you get points. Hanging on to them, not so good, give you negative points at the end of the game. So there are other things that are added to the game with Europe, which are not in the original game. So tunnels is one that came to mind. So on the board, there are some black outlined or bordered routes, but this is where you have to put tunnels. So when claiming a tunnel, a player has to draw 3 cards from the top of the draw deck and reveal them. So for each card that matches the color of the tunnel, including locomotive cards, the player has to pay additional cards as part of the cost. So if you do not wish to pay the cost, then you can just forfeit your turn, play continues, and then the 3 cards that were drawn goes back to the pile. So that's tricky because you could end up losing a turn if you don't want to pay or can't pay. Something else that's new to the game are ferries. So ferries are gray routes, and they have to be claimed with the required number of locomotive cards in addition to other cards required to pay for the length of the route. So things can get really expensive in this game. Another new feature in this one are stations. And this is where you get 3 of them in the game. So let me start off with that. You don't get very many. And these ones it allows you to use a route leading from that city that has been claimed by another player. So maybe you can't get to it. This is another way for you to get to that route because maybe it's something you need to get on your destination card. So that was a lot, but I had to explain the differences between the two. So those are some new things, and I find that plays really well in the application. Something else to note in the application, some people may not enjoy the tutorial. I like these types of tutorials where it's a head-in-hand tutorial, I call it. There's a little head that's talking to you with little bubbles and then a hand kind of pointing you to do something. Hey, click here, do this. And I like that, and then you can kind of start your game. Versus doing a separate tutorial. Some people like that. I like to kind of do the tutorial and then play the game throughout, or it helps you through that kind of first few rounds. Not everybody likes that. This game may annoy some because it notifies you of your turn. So turns go fast. So you'll get choo-choo, it's your turn. Choo-choo, it's your turn. And some people may not like that. Okay, I know it's my turn. I don't need you to notify me of that. I'm one of those people. I don't mind it. I don't like sounds so much, so I turn it off. I just find it's a lot for me, and this game isn't any exception. So that's something you have to take with a grain of salt. Lastly, the game itself, it's busy. There's a lot going on. You know, you've got your stuff on the bottom. You have another player's stuff in the upper left corner. You have your rail cards and destination cards on the right-hand side. But I feel everything is laid out well enough that you can understand it. Because I hadn't played it in a long time, and I found it was very clear and easy to pick up on. So for me, I appreciate that. I understood it. It was clear, but it is a little busy. So overall, Ticket to Ride, I actually really enjoyed the app implementation, and I really enjoyed the Europe expansion. So something you should all check out.
I really enjoy the Ticket to Ride app, and I like Ticket to Ride, and I think they've done a good job with the app, so I'm glad that you got to explore the expansion in that. For me, I wanted to highlight a newer game called Krumit's Tale. This is a board game app without an analog counterpart. It's from the Slothworks studio that when we talked about when we talked about digital games that could be board games a couple of episodes ago, Slothworks was a studio that I wanted to highlight because they really do great stuff. It's available on Steam and on iOS and Android. I think Steam's like $14.99. I think iOS, Android is like $6.99. And this is a card-based dungeon crawl game. And if Slothworks sounds familiar, it might be because their other game, Meteorfall, is just a stunning, stunning example of mobile card gaming. It's just such a delight. It's so good. But this is about Krumit's Tale. Krumit's Tale, what's going to happen is you're going to get a little grid of cards or tiles. And those tiles and cards represent a number of different things, including enemies or abilities, health, all sorts of things like that. As the character you choose, you're going to be going through these, tapping on tiles, selecting them, either getting the ability or the equipment or facing the foe. And as you go through it, when you finish a round, you can add more perks to your character or you can add more cards to your deck, things like that as you're kind of deck building and refining it as you go to beat the big bosses and things like that. The game initially comes with 4 playable characters. Each of them plays quite differently, which again is something I really enjoy in these kinds of games. And they actually just released a 5th character that you can download as DLC. So I love that they're continuing to support the game and expand it as well. The game Krumit's Tale has a ton of personality. I love the art style on it. It's a little different. It's just got character. And I think that that's really fun. It's got nice little ambient animations and things like that that add personality to the experience. What I will also say, it's a tough game. This game is challenging. Oh my gosh, it's so hard. And figuring out that tile or card management and the timing of when you do what, also knowing when to run away, which is something that you won't typically want to do in a game like this. It goes against your instincts. Oh, no. You gotta be planning on running away once in a while here. And regrouping. I really like this game. I think it does so many things well because different perks, there's limits to how much you can use them, and you can see what enemies are doing and mitigating their damage and then throwing your damage at them. Oh my gosh, there's a lot going on. The interface is simple and it is a challenging game to go through. And I think that your first few runs or attempts are going to be failures, quite frankly, as you're familiarizing yourself. But I think if you stick with it, it's really, really rewarding. I think it's another great gaming experience. It works great in mobile. From Slothworks, I think they get these mechanisms. And I think they get how they can pull on mechanisms that we might traditionally consider analog and leverage the advantages of the digital world to add a little bit of complexity that would be hard to do in a physical space, like limiting the number of times an ability can be used. Like tracking that with a physical game would be challenging. In a digital form, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So Krumit's Tale, if you want a challenging deck building dungeon crawl game with a lot of personality, it is definitely worth a look. I'm really, really enjoying it. I already paid for the DLC to get the 5th character, even though I have not come close to beating the game with the other characters. But I have to have it all because I'm enjoying it that much. And that is Krumit's Tale from Slothworks Studios.
Yeah, after you mentioned it, I think I snagged it on Steam there. So it was on sale, everybody, if you want to grab it as well.
Good luck, Mandi.
We asked, you answered. It's time to discuss hot topics in Victory Points.
It has been a long time since we've had a Victory Points segment, partly because we were having so much fun with Game Pie. But as mentioned in our last episode, we realized that now that we've gone through virtual conventions, we've talked about virtual conventions previously, but that was really before they happened. And a lot of it was just guessing on our part. Well, now they've happened. Now a lot of major conventions have gone through their virtual cycle. And we thought it would be interesting to look back at what has actually happened, what our real experiences were, what your real experiences were with these kind of digital experiences. So we posted on the Board Game Geek Guild what met and fell short of your expectations. What did you like? What do you hope they improve on? Was there an experience that stood out for you? I also posted this on social media, and we got a lot of great responses that I think, honestly, I think they really do represent the breadth of people's experiences with virtual conventions and their feelings about them. So, Mandi, why don't we go through what you all were saying, and we can chime in as we want to.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so let's start with Mark, the community manager for Tabletopia. So as Tabletopia, Spiel was our most successful in terms of traffic, with Oshucks coming second. On a personal level, I think Oshucks was the most intimate and connected con because it was driven upfront by content creators.
Madbana says, as somebody who hasn't been able to get out to game conventions before, having the ability to participate in virtual ones has been great. Gen Camp was a favorite of theirs for that reason because it's always been online. They love all the play-alongs, panel discussions, game previews that the online cons offered, and hope in the future, when cons are in person again, they can still offer a small portion of this as well.
Will says, Spiel got it right. The zones map made it feel like a place rather than another website with links. It could still be improved for sure, but it was by far ahead of the others.
To be fair.
Thank you. To be fair, the same model could be used in other non-board game conventions or even as local community hubs. Sorry, there were a few acronyms in there. Threw me off.
Pat says that they attended several virtual conventions throughout the past months and will be helping host one in a couple of weeks. They've had a variety of experiences. They felt that the earlier cons were difficult to navigate, but there was improvement. Playing new games is what they missed the most, but watching the Dice Tower and Board Game Geek Cruise play games was a close second to that experience of real conventions because they miss being able to sit down, even virtually, to try out the Origin and Essen releases themselves, navigating Facebook, Twitch, Discord, Tabletop Simulator, and all the other ways of visiting the virtual cons was difficult. And there are just too many people behind the tech curve on these platforms, and there was little to no help from various convention staff. They understand everyone's doing their best, but most of these experiences assumed that people had at least a good working knowledge of all the electronic meeting alternatives prior to the convention experience.
Daniel says, I think the content is there. The problem is visualizing and filtering it all consistently, especially when it's decentralized amongst private discords. I love what Tricon did for thinking outside the box, but curious how much of a hurdle the virtual format is.
Dan CJ says, I didn't really bother with any virtual cons this year. I guess I could have made the time to play some online games on TTS or something similar, but when I'm at home, real life intervenes. Whereas if I go and stay away to do a con, that time is completely reserved for board game related activity. Also, one thing I love at these things is being able to bring and buy, and both selling their own games and buying new ones. And unfortunately for them, virtual cons just cannot compete.
Krajevskoy says, do the virtual cons live up to expectations compared to in-person conventions? No. Did I participate in what virtual cons had to offer? Yes, I did some of the interactive Twitch discussions, but the team I follow do those anyways. The con just had bigger news items, but I will continue to watch virtual cons, at least the free ones, as there is a saying, if you do not like what you have, try having nothing. That's fair. So...
Thank you, everybody, for your comments and your input. I think all of this is really astute and reflects a good slice of different people's experiences. Now, Mandi, I know you in particular were far more involved with some of the virtual convention experiences than even I was. What are your thoughts on looking back at these?
I definitely, you're right, I did a few of them for sure, and I definitely think it's better than having nothing, right? And I do have to say, as a teacher and having my job kind of switch to online, the comment about people having that prior knowledge of certain platforms prior to taking part of these really resonated with me, because this is something we're having this hurdle with teaching, and I feel like this is something that could have allowed more people to participate. So I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe you and I, we use Discord, like we're chatting on Discord right now to do this. Some people may not even know what that is. How do I do that? How do I get that? So then it kind of puts the onus on someone to have another hurdle to kind of go through to get to the convention. So in that effect, I feel that's something that can be improved upon for next year. But on the good side, I feel I actually was able to see a lot more games than I normally would have seen at a convention. Normally we're running around, we don't have time to do these things, or there's just so much you can't see. Having it on Tabletopia or those sorts of things, you can now say, oh, you know what? I'm feeling like checking this out today. Let me do that. Or, wow, I couldn't make this game at a convention and see this person talk live. Now they have that opportunity to go and do that, because a lot of these things were also recorded or available to see after the fact. So
right.
It had its pros and cons, but those are kind of the two things that stood out to me.
And for me, I think Mad Bonna's comment about access is really important. And they say something that really clicks with me too, is personally, virtual conventions have been very challenging for me. And that relates directly to what Dan CJ said, that real life intervenes when you're sitting at a desk at home. And quite frankly, I'm at a desk in front of a monitor so much for my day job and for what we do here and everything. It can be tiring.
Yes, absolutely.
But I have the privilege of going to physical conventions. I've experienced those. I don't inherently feel shut out by those experiences. And I think for people who have in the past felt that way, virtual conventions allow access and experience where there wasn't that possibility before. And I think that that is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely agree with Mad Bonna that conventions are making a mistake if they don't, in the future, make a virtual experience some part of their convention, even though the convention's happening in real life. Engage the broader community. Offer something to everyone, not just the people that can go. Especially for large conventions, they should have the resources to do this. And I think it gives so much back to the community in a positive way. So I definitely agree with that. I don't think we're ever going to replicate a physical convention experience. I am fascinated by the different approaches, different groups, different conventions made to kind of give that feel. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there were some successes and some misses.
Sure.
But what I'm really sensing from us all, right, the broader community, is there's a desire to engage, but we're still hoping for improvements on how that is implemented.
And it's new, right? anytime something's new, there are always things that are going to need to be fixed, changed, adjusted. That's just how it goes. So now we've done it. And I think it was one of those things we were kind of forced into a little bit because of the situation. But It wasn't a bad thing necessarily. It is maybe something we were missing. And when we go back to, maybe going to conventions in person, you're right. We won't be ignoring that group that maybe isn't able to attend. So
let's see. Thank you so much, everybody, for chiming in. I really do love victory points and hearing from you all. So glad that you all chimed in and appreciate your comments there. We'll probably have a game pie coming up in our next episode. So if you have any suggestions on that, feel free to let us know. You are always welcome to email us. Now, I fully admit I'm catching up on my Dice Tower email. I've got a few messages I'm replying to. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and your kindness and your messages. But if you want to reach out and drop game pie ideas, feel free to send a message to me at Suzanne@dicetower.com.
And I think I'm almost caught up. I think there are 3 of you left to have to respond to, so I'm getting to it. You can also reach me at Mandi, that's Mandi with an I, at dicetower.com.
As always, thank you so much for joining us on the episode today. It is a pleasure and privilege to be part of your extended gaming family, especially now more than ever. Next episode, a 3-up, 683, featuring Tom, Eric, and Mandi.
Oh, dear.
And you've got it, girl. And they're going to uplift their ultimate U games.
Why do they pick you? I mean, it's like, oh, goodness, I have so much anxiety about you. But you know what? You've given me some good ideas, so okay, we'll go with it.
Just trucking through that alphabet. If you remember back when they were first talking about it, and Eric was pretty skeptical about it, but they've done an admirable job of getting through the alphabet. So until next time, folks, I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandi Hutchinson.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassal Memorial Fund is an organization dedicated to helping gamers in need. Learn more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvassal.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Suzanne, Mandi, and Eric with assistance from Roy Canaday and Rob Searing. Our theme is composed by Timothy Pinkham and arranged by Matt Bellier. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at podcast@dicetower.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming.
All right, everyone, it's that time again for 2 Truths and a Lie. So I'm going to go first with mine from last episode. I liked Black Stallion, I liked Seabiscuit, and I liked Black Beauty. If you picked the lie was I liked Seabiscuit, you would be correct. It was, I much preferred, the Black Stallion, Black Beauty. It just had a fun vibe to it. So there you go.
Alrighty. Last episode, I said I'm allergic to bee stings, I'm allergic to grass, and I'm allergic to pollen. And the lie is that I'm allergic to pollen. But I am, I can't go on picnics and sit in the grass. It's so sad because I get all itchy. It's not cool.
Oh, no. Oh, dear. Not good to have. All right. So new for this episode. Here we go. I've been published in 3 magazines. I was interviewed on the news, and I have over 100 board game selfies on my phone that I've never posted on social media.
It's so random.
I know. Throw you all off.
Mine is more thematic. I said, I've been to Mesa Verde. I've been to Mount Rushmore. And I've been to Yosemite.
All right. Well, lots of good stuff this episode. Good luck.